her nightlife than her coursework. As she became one of the most photographed young women in Europe through the late 1970s, magazine covers and paparazzi coverage overshadowed her academic achievements, flattening a serious, intelligent young woman into a caricature of a party princess. At 21, Caroline married Philippe Junot, a French businessman 17 years her senior, with a reputation for nightlife and instability, exactly the kind of match her parents feared. Grace reportedly did not believe the marriage would last, and that unease proved justified quickly during their honeymoon. Junot allegedly brought along a photographer, and private images from the trip ended up in tabloids. It was a painful preview of the marriage to come. By October 1980, after a little over 2 years, the couple divorced, though the Vatican would not annul the marriage until 1992, leaving Caroline in a prolonged and awkward limbo. Caroline's life changed again when she met Stefano Casiraghi, an Italian businessman and offshore powerboat racer, in 1983, a period when both of them were recovering from earlier heartbreak. Unlike previous suitors, Stefano reportedly treated her as a person rather than a title, and the relationship moved quickly. They married in a brief civil ceremony at the end of 1983, with Caroline already pregnant with their first child. Because the Vatican still considered her first marriage valid, there was no religious ceremony at the time. The marriage brought a period that friends and media both described as unusually normal and happy for a Grimaldi household. The couple had 3 children together, Andrea in 1984, Charlotte in 1986, and Pierre in 1987, and Stefano became close to Rainier, who reportedly treated him almost like a second son. For a woman raised in a stiff, dutiful environment, this new family life felt like something genuinely her own. But Stefano's passion was offshore powerboat racing, a sport Caroline had always found dangerous. He'd already won a world title in 1989 and was defending it in 1990 when, on October 3rd of that year, his boat flipped violently off Monaco's coast. His co-pilot survived. Stefano did not. He was only 30. Caroline, in Paris at the time, returned to Monaco in black, a widow with 3 young children. Echoes of her own mother's fatal car accident just 8 years earlier were impossible to ignore. Some accounts mention rumors of threats against Stefano before the crash and questions about sabotage, though authorities ultimately ruled it an accident. After his death, Caroline largely withdrew from public life for a time, retreating to a quiet village in France with her children. Long before Stefano's death, Caroline had already begun building a life of public service, becoming president of Monaco's committee for the International Year of the Child in 1979 at just 22. In 1981, she founded a hotline for young people dealing with drug abuse, neglect, and suicidal thoughts, work that reportedly felt personal given her own isolated upbringing. After Grace's death in 1982, she took on leadership of the Princess Grace Foundation, later expanding into the arts through the Printemps d'Arts Festival and the founding of the Ballet de Monte Carlo in 1985. Even after losing Stefano, she kept expanding this work, eventually becoming president of Aide Mondiale, the child protection organization her mother had founded, and serving as a UNICEF patron and UNESCO Goodwill Ambassador focused on girls' education and children affected by war and trafficking. Over the following decades, she became less known as a tragic widow and more as a steady cultural and humanitarian force behind the throne. In the mid-1990s, Caroline became involved with Prince Ernst August of Hanover, whose marriage to Chantal Hochley, once a friend of Caroline's, became the subject of a very public scandal. Ernst August divorced in 1997, and he and Caroline married in a civil ceremony in 1999, on Caroline's 42nd birthday. Their daughter Alexandra was born later that year, and the timing fueled further tabloid speculation. This marriage, unlike her relationship with Stefano, proved troubled. Reports throughout the 2000s described public outbursts, aggressive behavior, and even a widely covered psychiatric hospitalization. In 2005, Caroline faced a brutal convergence of crises. Her father, Prince Rainier III, died on April 6th after the world has always known Princess Caroline of Monaco as a fixture of European high society, a glamorous face at galas, a name tied to one of the most famous royal houses in the world. But the woman behind that image carries a far heavier story than most people realize, a childhood shaped by duty rather than affection, a mother who quietly mourned the career she gave up, two husbands lost to tragedy and turmoil, and a lifetime spent turning private grief into public purpose. Caroline was born on January 23rd, 1957, inside the Prince's Palace of Monaco itself, not in a hospital. From her very first moments, her birth was less a personal milestone than a matter of state. Under the 1918 treaty between France and Monaco, the principality's independence depended on the ruling family producing a clear heir. Otherwise, France retained the right to absorb the tiny country. In 1957, Monaco covered barely 2 square kilometers and had a population of around 18,000 people, which meant a single child's existence could determine the nation's fate. Newspapers across Europe treated her birth less like a celebrity announcement and more like a constitutional development. Some outlets even running legal analysis of what her arrival meant for Monaco's sovereignty. The palace released an official bulletin recording the exact time of her birth, so the line of succession could be documented without delay. Caroline became a public figure before she had any chance to be a private one. Yet even that status was conditional. She was named heir presumptive, not heir absolute, meaning any younger brother would immediately outrank her under the succession rules of the time. So, from birth, she was raised as Monaco's insurance policy, but one that could be replaced at any moment. Her mother, Grace Kelly, had been one of Hollywood's biggest stars before marrying Prince Rainier III in 1956, walking away from an Oscar-winning career and enormous earning potential to become Princess of Monaco. By the time Caroline arrived a year later, Grace had already stopped acting, but those close to her later described a woman who privately mourned the identity she'd left behind, sometimes screening her old films in the Palace Cinema just to remember who she used to be. Rainier, meanwhile, ran Monaco like a business empire. He was building from scratch, expanding tourism, hotels, and casinos, often working long hours late into the night. Palace staff described an atmosphere where formality came before warmth. In public, the family projected effortless glamour at galas and state dinners. In private, meals were often taken separately, with the children dining apart from their parents. Caroline reportedly didn't share a dinner table with her parents until she was around 14, a detail that captures just how much of her early life was shaped by protocol rather than closeness. Her real emotional anchor during these years was her nanny, Maureen Oma Wood. So much so that when the nanny once left for vacation, Caroline and her brother Albert were said being inconsolable until Grace called her back early. Any sense of security Caroline might have had as heir was upended on March 14, 1958, when her brother Albert was born. Under Monaco's succession rules at the time, his arrival immediately moved him ahead of her in line to the throne. Caroline, not yet old enough to speak in full sentences, had already gone from the nation's safeguard to second in line. Then, in 1965, her younger sister Stephanie was born, adding another shift in a household where attention already felt scarce. Caroline would later describe her upbringing with a line that summed up the whole system. What she had to do always came before what she wanted to do. Her father wanted disciplined, presentable children, and from an early age her days were built around protocol and public appearances rather than freedom. Her escape came through education rather than rebellion. Boarding school at St. Mary's in Ascot, then Sciences Po, and eventually the Sorbonne in Paris, where she studied philosophy alongside psychology and biology. She was, by all accounts, a genuinely strong student, earning her baccalaureate with high honors. But the press was far more interested.